Instead, they all find a way to win in various ways. And so where I want to start is Knoxville, Tennessee. And this isn't where I typically start the show. I'm not going to go spend the next 10 minutes telling you that this is a program changing win and Tennessee's going to make the playoff. That's not what this is about. But what it is about is something often that I talk about on this show, and that is that too often we in college football focus on the big picture, college football playoff, who's number one, as I just told you a second ago. Not often enough do we appreciate some of these smaller stories. And I do think the Tennessee story right now is as good as any in college football. And it's really interesting, right? Because if you followed this game really from about midweek until about 7:20, 7:30 Eastern time on Saturday night, this was the full Tennessee football experience really over the last 20 years. I think everybody knows, but Tennessee had only beaten Florida once since 2004. This game had so much hype coming in. It was sold out early in the week. College game day comes to town. Tennessee is an 11.5 point favorite down to 11, but who cares? 11-point favorite coming in. And it is that quintessential Tennessee game where so much good is happening. And I'm sorry, Tennessee fans, but you know I'm right, that you almost expect something bad to happen. And that was kind of the push-pull on Saturday, right? Game opens. Anthony Richardson, who had struggled all year, came in, hadn't thrown a single touchdown pass all year. As I joked on Twitter, he looked like a right-handed Michael Vick for most of the game, okay? So in the game, Florida, again, an 11-point underdog. They jump out to a 10-3 lead. They were up at 1.17-10. And I bring it up because Anthony Richardson is playing the game of his life. Tennessee is actually playing well, but they're leaving points on the board. And, you know, you're sitting there saying, Tennessee, man, come on. You're the better team. You're frankly outplaying Florida at the half. What is going on? Get it together. And to Tennessee's credit, they did take a 17-14 lead at halftime. I think I said Florida was up 17-14. Florida's up 14-10, excuse me. Tennessee takes a 17-14 lead going into the half. Then all of a sudden, you see why Tennessee came in as the 11th ranked team in the country. They start to pull away. They start to do what they do. They break a few big plays. And to their credit, all of a sudden, you look up and Tennessee's up, you know, by a substantial margin midway through the fourth quarter. They score a touchdown with 7:55 left, so about 8 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. They're up 38-21, okay? So I'm not great at math. 38-21 tells me this. That is a 17-point game. That is a 3-score game, meaning that Florida has to score 3 different times, at the very least, score 2 touchdowns, convert 2 extra points to make it a 1-point game, and then they still got to score again. And that's assuming that they can hold Tennessee's offense, which they haven't been able to do all day, okay? So Tennessee is in control. Tennessee struggled early. They're looking good. And then again, this was the quintessential Tennessee experience. Up 38-21. Then Florida scores with a little under 5 minutes to go. Missed the 2-point conversion, so it's 38-27. Still not great at math. That's 11 points. That's 2 full possessions. Is there anything really to worry about? No, nothing to worry about. It's Tennessee. We're going to be fine. We're at home. We got this. And then Florida scores again with under a minute to go, 38-33. And then they convert the onside kick. They get the ball back with under like 10 seconds. I think it was under 20 seconds to go. They get the ball back, a couple plays, deep pass. It's eventually batted down, intercepted to end the game, and Tennessee holds on to it. So first of all, the full quintessential Tennessee experience. You fall down early when you're a heavy favorite. You rally back. You're in control. And then just when it seems like everything is going to be okay, Florida puts on this incredible rally, but Tennessee does hold on to win 38-33. And so it's funny because if that was just where the game ended, I probably wouldn't have led the show with this, okay? But then something struck me when Josh Heupel went to do the CBS postgame interview, and I think to me this is why this is such an important topic. Josh Heupel, when he went to do the CBS postgame interview, I expected him to do the typical cliche coaching thing, right? Oh, we let him in. We made too many mistakes late. We have to clean everything up. That is an unacceptable way to finish this game. And instead, you know what Josh Heupel did? He did the exact opposite. He said, oh my goodness, what an atmosphere. This is college football. How great is this? This is the greatest atmosphere I have ever been in. And so his answer alone shocked me because he wasn't looking at it like everybody else did, which was just Tennessee survived, take a sigh of relief. And it said something to me about who he is, who this program is, and how far he's come. What Josh Heupel was saying wasn't, hey, the 11th ranked team in the country was an 11-point favorite and we almost blew it. What he said is, we are Tennessee. We have overcome so much over the last 3, 4, 5 years. And rather than focus on the negative, focus on the fact that we gave up a lot of points late and made it closer than it should have been, we are going to celebrate this. We just beat Florida for just the second time since 2004. This is a cause for celebration. And it really did strike me. What Josh Heupel was telling us was, don't focus on how it ended. Focus on how far we have come. And again, it speaks to something that I've talked about on this show so many times. And I know I've said it twice, so forgive me. But we in college football, we spend so much time, the college football playoff. Who's number one? Who's number two? Who's number three? Can this team beat Georgia to win the national championship? That I do think we don't spend nearly enough time focusing on the great stories outside of the upper echelon of college football. We celebrated on this show Mark Stoops a few weeks ago and what he's done at Kentucky. Later in the show today, we're going to celebrate what PJ Fleck has done in Minnesota. And I will be darned if Josh Heupel is fired up about the narrow game against Florida because he knows how big that is for his team and his program, then darn it, we are going to celebrate that here on the Air Tour Sports Podcast as well. And so when I look at this win, I think about not only how important it is, second win against Florida since 2004, but that it really does show you how far Tennessee has come. And I think that's easy to forget because Josh Heupel has made it look so easy. And so what I want to do is just take half a second. What I want to do is take half a second and go back to January of 2021 when Jeremy Pruitt was fired, okay? Because when Jeremy Pruitt was fired, I think it's very easy to just sit here and say, oh, it wasn't that bad and, whatever, who cares? Tennessee, they're not going to win the national championship. Why do you care so much, Torres? No. Josh Heupel inherited a real mess, and I don't think we appreciate just how much this program has overcome in a short amount of time. I'm actually going to read you a tweet from our Torres on the Vols account. Our guy Jackson crushes it on the Torres on the Vols account. Here's what he tweeted on Sunday morning. He said, 18 months ago, Tennessee was broken. Many said the program was done for and it would never be relevant again. Fast forward to today, Heupel has his Vols in the top 10 and 4-0 in just his second year. Many will act like this is a big deal. No, it's a miracle. Shout out to Jackson, because I don't think even me, somebody whose job it is to cover and focus on this stuff 365 days a year, realizes what this program has been through and how much they overcame. So let's go back to 2021, January, when Jeremy Pruitt is fired. First of all, Tennessee's coming off a 3-7 season. It was a disaster. It did not end well. Remember, that was the COVID-only season where Tennessee and all the SEC played only conference teams. And Tennessee, actually, if you remember, it's hard to remember now, they actually started out pretty good that season. Overall, they start out 2-0. Then they lose 6 straight games and some really embarrassing ones. I mean, they lose at Auburn. They get punked by Florida. They fall to 2-6 overall. They do beat Vanderbilt. They end up losing to A&M to end the regular season. And so, they are coming off a 3-7 season. Well, that's not why Jeremy Pruitt got fired. He got fired because there were major NCAA rules violations, which we've talked about on this show. It was bringing recruits on campus during COVID. It was paying recruits before NIL. It was having his wife pay recruits before NIL. And so you go back to the January of 2021. It doesn't seem like that long ago. But if you think about all of the residual, whatever that Jeremy Pruitt left behind, that place was a disaster. 3-7, major NCAA sanctions looming. And I know whatever going to say, oh, it's NCAA sanctions. Who cares? The NCAA can't do anything. We didn't feel that way in January 2021. We felt like the NCAA still had some teeth. The NCAA was going to throw the book at Tennessee for major rules violations under Jeremy Pruitt. And so 3-7 season, NCAA violations coming. And what was also happening in college football at that point? Oh, the transfer portal was becoming a thing. And this is the part that I don't think Heupel gets enough credit for. I went back and looked up just the surface level who transferred out from Tennessee after Jeremy Pruitt was fired. Well, how about this? Their top 2 running backs, including Eric Gray, who rushed for over 100 yards on Saturday night for Oklahoma in their loss to Kansas State. So they lost their top 2 running backs. They lost their their 2 starting offensive tackles. They lost their top 2 linebackers, including Henry To'oTo'o, who plays at Alabama now, who might be a first-round pick in this 2022 NFL draft, 2023 NFL draft, I should say, coming up. And they lost a starting safety. So that is the surface level of who they lost off a 3-7 team. That is the baseline of where Josh Heupel took over. A 3-7 team that lost most of their front-end talent. And what has this guy done? Year 1, he goes 7-6. And even in that 7-6 year, if you remember back to last year, there were plenty of opportunities for him to win games that Tennessee didn't end up winning. Remember, they insert Hendon Hooker late, and we're going to be talking about Hendon Hooker in a minute. They insert Hendon Hooker late against Pitt. They rally. They can't quite win. If Hendon Hooker starts, they probably win that game. Instead, they lose that one. The Ole Miss game, as we've talked about on this show, Ole Miss, Hendon Hooker gets hurt late. He doesn't finish the game. Joe Milton does. If Hendon Hooker finishes that game, they might win that one. And then, of course, there's the bowl game. So 7-6, but it was probably closer to an 8-5, 9-4 type season than 7-6. And now Tennessee is 4-0 right now with a win over Florida for just the second time. And so what I'm not going to do, as I just said, is completely overreact. Okay, I'm not going to sit here and say this win makes Tennessee a playoff contender. That's not what this is about. Tennessee actually has a bye this week. Then they play at LSU. Then they play Alabama at home. Then they play Kentucky at home. Then they play at Georgia. Okay, so I'm not naive enough, and I'm not going to do the overhype everything and overreact everything. And this means Tennessee's going to go 11-1 and beat Georgia. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is think about how far this program has come. From 3-7 with most of their best players transferring out to now 4-0 in year 2 with a win over Florida. And let me just say this too. Not only a win over Florida, not only a very distinct brand with this exciting, fun, fast style of play under Josh Heupel, not just with an offensive savant as the head coach. Can we talk about Hendon Hooker for just half a second before we switch gears and get to some of the other stories from Saturday? Hendon Hooker is having a career at Tennessee. Listen, I'm not smart enough to know all of Tennessee's history and where he ranks. And I know they had some guy named Peyton Manning, number 16, who was pretty darn good. But I mean, what this guy has done as the quarterback at Tennessee is just absolutely incredible. Okay. So first of all, just this season, Hendon Hooker is completing 71% of his passes, 8 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 1,200 yards passing. Okay. That is absolutely incredible. Now, again, don't claim to be a math major. 1,200 yards passing over 4 games. That's 300 yards per game, 2 touchdowns per game without a single interception. Then the stat that I threw at you on Friday's show, Hendon Hooker, as a starter, has thrown just 2 interceptions dating back to last year, 3 interceptions total, 39 touchdowns, 3 interceptions as the quarterback at Tennessee. And so I don't love to do Heisman stuff early, but in an offseason where we justifiably, to be clear, this isn't a knock on Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Caleb Williams, Will Levis, Quinn Ewers, Dylan Gabriel at Oklahoma. Did anyone anywhere talk about Hendon Hooker? I mean, think about what Hendon Hooker did on Saturday against Florida. 22 of 28 passing against the Gators, 349 yards. And I know there was a couple busts in coverage and blame the Florida DBs and all that good stuff. At the same time, 349 yards passing, 22 of 28. He's completing 72% of his passes this year. And oh, by the way, against Florida, he also rushed for another 112 yards and 1 touchdown. And so again, this isn't to say that Tennessee has arrived and they're better than Georgia and they're winning the SEC this year. But too often we overlook these great stories in college football that aren't about the playoff, that aren't about competing for a national championship, that aren't about whether this team can beat Bama or Georgia or is this team surpassed Ohio State. No, Tennessee is one of the great stories in college football. Josh Heupel has done an incredible job. And I think the way that he reacted on Saturday tells you everything you need to know. He wasn't worried about some of the misassignments late in the fourth quarter. He wasn't worried about a 38-21 lead becoming a 38-33 final score. What he was saying was, appreciate this moment, Vols fans. This isn't easy. We just beat Florida. Let's celebrate. And we're going to do the same thing here on the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast, because what this guy has done is absolutely incredible.